Tensions are rising in South America. Throughout the 2020s so far, you'd be forgiven for thinking the continent was a rare island of peace in a world increasingly full of conflict. The decade has already witnessed the ongoing war in Ukraine, Israel's wars against Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and the Houthis in Yemen, a dangerous spat between India and Pakistan, the ongoing civil war in Sudan, a string of coups and terrorist insurgencies in the Sahel, and even a flare-up between Thailand and Cambodia. However, all of these conflicts have been far across the oceans from South America. Now we could be rapidly heading towards conflict at the roof of the continent. Last week, Donald Trump dispatched a serious naval fleet to Venezuelan waters, and Venezuela responded by mobilizing its military in an equally serious manner. Let's take a closer look at what's going on and whether another war is around the corner, this time right in the US's backyard. On August 20th, the White House announced that it was sending 3 Aegis-guided missile destroyers to the waters off Venezuela as part of President Donald Trump's effort to combat threats from Latin American drug cartels. The USS Gravely, the USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson, along with some 4,000 personnel, were expected to arrive within a few days, although whether they're actually in the region yet is unclear. A week later, on August 27th, a US source speaking on condition of anonymity told AFP that President Donald Trump would be sending 2 more ships, the guided missile cruiser USS Lake Erie and the nuclear-powered fast attack submarine USS Newport News, to the Caribbean the following week. The contingent will also reportedly include at least 1 Boeing P-8A Poseidon spy plane. The P-8 is a maritime patrol aircraft, not primarily a spy plane, but it is capable of a myriad of surveillance tasks. The news of these deployments took many by surprise, but recent events have definitely suggested that a major escalation between Trump and the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro was brewing. It'd be an understatement to say that Maduro is not one of Trump's favorite people and vice versa, and the enmity between the two dates back to Trump's first presidential term from 2017 to 2020, which is precisely the time period to which the roots of the current escalation can be traced. In 2020, Maduro and 14 others, including several close allies, were hit with federal charges of narco-terrorism and conspiracy with the Colombian FARC insurgent group to import cocaine into the US. For more than 20 years, Maduro and a number of high-ranking colleagues allegedly conspired with the FARC, causing tons of cocaine to enter and devastate American communities, then US Attorney General William P. Barr said at the time. Originally, the US offered a $15 million reward for Maduro's arrest, a bounty that was later bumped up to $25 million. Earlier this month, the Justice Department announced that it was increasing the reward to $50 million. That follows the designation in February of the notorious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua as a terrorist organization, alongside the Salvadorian MS-13 gang and 6 groups from Mexico. Both of these events signaled that Trump was gearing up for more serious action against Maduro. Interestingly, in mid-August, 2 South American nations announced that they were also designating a Venezuelan drug cartel as a terrorist organization. By August 21st, both Paraguay and Ecuador declared the Cartel of the Suns as an international terrorist organization, opening the door to military and intelligence operations against the narco networks affiliated with the Chavista regime's criminal apparatus inside the country. Maduro is accused of being one of the leaders of the Cartel Suns, along with other high-ranking political and military figures. The name of the cartel actually derives from the sun insignia sported by Venezuelan generals, underlying how heavily top military figures are involved in its leadership and activities. This shadowy group has been listed as one of the main cartels whose drug smuggling activities the US fleet has been sent to Venezuela to combat. So perhaps it's just a coincidence that Paraguay and Ecuador designated the cartel as a terrorist organization just days before Trump sent warships to Venezuela to combat it. Or maybe these steps were further indications that something major was brewing. After all, both nations enjoy healthy security relations with the US. In June 2024, the US and Ecuador signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen security sector capabilities and define shared objectives for security cooperation. The US has subsequently provided significant material support to Ecuador, including a C-130H Hercules aircraft, trucks, boat motors, technology equipment, and training, as well as a comprehensive aid package valued at approximately $93.4 million. There's an Office of Security Cooperation at the US Embassy in the Ecuadorian capital Quito, and the nations cooperate on counter-narcotics and counter-transnational organized crime capacity-building assistance. Similarly, the US and Paraguay signed a security-related MOU in August 2025. This document was ostensibly related to the examination of protection requests and the prevention of illegal and irregular migration, viewed by both nations as a national security threat. However, it underscores decades of security cooperation, including in the areas of counter-narcotics and counter-transnational organized crime. The announcements of the terrorist designation for the Cartel of the Suns reflect the growing political rift on the continent. Earlier in August, no doubt cognizant of the growing pressure on him, Maduro had proposed that Venezuela and Colombia coordinate joint efforts against drug trafficking, including possible collaboration between the armed forces of both countries. On August 12th, Colombian President Gustavo Petro publicly endorsed the idea. Nicolas Maduro has not spoken about uniting the armies, but about coordinating them to end drug trafficking in the border area, and that is beneficial for both nations and has yielded significant results. My order given is to coordinate intelligence for the fight against drug trafficking with the US, Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, with China and the Arab world, and with the entire world. And I've given instructions that above political differences, the armies of Latin America should coordinate with priority. The evidence suggests that Ecuador, Paraguay, and the US do not find these statements to be particularly credible or reassuring. Maduro, for his part, has consistently denied the allegations against him, as have other Venezuelan leaders also accused of being Cartel of the Sun's leaders. He paints the allegations against his regime as a regime change operation, denies the existence of the Cartel of the Suns, and insists that the drug smuggling charges are a witch hunt devoid of substance. In an interview on August 27th, he spelled out his position. Who produces cocaine? Colombia. How is it exported? 87% through Colombia's Pacific region and Ecuador. Where does the money from cocaine sales go? We're talking about thousands, millions of dollars. Cocaine ends up in the US. Who buys it there? And where's the money from purchases and resales? In which banks? Let them wage the war they want at home, in the United States, against their own mafia that controls the entire drug business in Colombia, Central America, and beyond. It's the US mafia that controls it, and they know it all too well. But they've changed the narrative. During the Soviet era, those they wanted to destroy were accused of communism. Later, they accused them of terrorism. Wars were fought in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. Now there's a new, crude, absurd accusation: drug trafficking. So I say Venezuela is a clean, drug-free territory. Our people, our state, our Bolivarian National Army, it's a clean, free state. To be fair, he may have a point about the need to crack down on the US end of the drug smuggling operation. In 2018, over 200 tons of cocaine was smuggled into the US from Venezuela, having crossed the border from Colombia, worth around $10 million. But that quantity of pure Colombian cocaine, when cut and distributed, could fetch tens of billions of dollars on the streets of the US, according to an estimate by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. That leaves a rather large number needing to be laundered through the US financial system every year, and Maduro is probably right that the rot stretches into some uncomfortably lofty places. However, the notion that Venezuela is a clean, drug-free territory is, on the face of it, well short of credible. You don't have to take our word for it. Venezuela's official pronouncements speak for themselves. In October 2021, the Venezuelan Ministry of the Interior issued an ordinary-looking statement about an anti-narcotics operation in the state of Zulia that perhaps revealed more than it intended. The military had destroyed 8 cocaine laboratories, seizing nearly half a ton of cocaine and nearly 10 tons of coca paste in the process. The argument that Venezuela is a drug-free nation falls on its face right there. However, the statement also revealed that 32 hectares of coca crops had been eradicated, destroying over 300,000 plants in the process. In other words, Venezuela was producing cocaine. That's an important development. Venezuela has been a key component in the transport of Colombian cocaine and other drugs into the US since at least the 1990s. A confidential US radar map revealed by CNN in 2018 shows the flight routes of small aircraft trafficking cocaine as they head from South America to the US. They depart from northwestern Venezuela's Zulia region, pass through the Caribbean, and then make a sharp turn west toward their destinations in the remote farmlands of Guatemala, on the Honduran coastline or in the Caribbean. From there, the drugs are shipped up to Mexico and then distributed to American cities. The flight paths may have changed somewhat over time, and more drugs may be being transported via unmanned, submersible vehicles, but the basic route remains largely the same today. In addition to long being a key node in the transport route, Venezuela's provinces on its northwestern border with Colombia have also increasingly become a location for the laboratories used to process coca paste into the cocaine hydrochloride that is exported. The business and management of this local drug production was formerly dominated by Colombians, but has gradually passed into Venezuelan hands. However, there is still an indisputable presence of dissidents from Colombia's FARC and ELN guerrilla groups protecting and promoting many of these activities. The effects of Plan Colombia, together with the peace agreements in the country, have produced a significant displacement of Colombian elements to Venezuela. Now, in addition to being directly complicit in the transit and processing of cocaine, Venezuela is increasingly growing the coca plants from which it's derived. To be fair, the volume of coca leaf cultivation in Venezuela, which amounts to hundreds of hectares, is still much lower than in Colombia, the largest producer in the world with around 250,000 hectares, or the country that follows it, Peru, with around 90,000 hectares, and Bolivia, just over 30,000, according to reports from 2023. But the country's border region, poor, isolated, abandoned by the state and dominated by armed groups, represents a perfect petri dish for the entire value chain to spread. And in a country trapped in an economic crisis, ruled by a corrupt regime, and ravaged by criminality, that is a dangerous proposition, especially when said corrupt regime's fingerprints are all over it. According to a revealing 2022 expose by the think tank Insight Crime, drug trafficking has become an important component of the strategies Maduro has used to cling onto power as his government has been rocked by constant social, political, and economic crises. His objective has been not to capture the riches of the transnational cocaine trade for himself, but to control and channel their flow, using it to reward the political, military, and criminal powers that Maduro needs to maintain his hold on government. So despite Maduro's protests, Venezuela is anything but drug-free, and there's an abundance of evidence that he and many other senior figures in his regime are neck-deep in it. And even though this government does regularly announce anti-drug operations like the one we mentioned earlier, they ring hollow. According to Javier Mayorga, director of the specialized website Crímenes Sin Castigo, or Crimes Without Punishment, there is a selective criterion by government officials when it comes to tackling drug trafficking activities, and this bias is also observed in the fight against crime or illegal mining. Some are attacked very harshly, while others are left exquisitely alone, as he puts it. We'll leave it to your imagination whose activities are left exquisitely alone. But all things considered, Trump's decision to ramp up the pressure on Maduro and the Cartel of the Suns he is accused of leading by increasing the bounty on his head and now dispatching a powerful naval force off the Venezuelan coast isn't without logic. However, what exactly the fleet will be doing there isn't entirely clear yet. Ostensibly, the force is being sent there to combat drug trafficking by sea, but CBS News Pentagon reporter Charlie de Agata revealed that, according to his sources, 2 of the 3 destroyers sent to Venezuelan waters had already been actively assisting the Coast Guard with anti-narcotics operations for months. Some observers also posited that the move is largely posturing, and most analysts have downplayed the risks of the US actually invading or striking Venezuela. I think what we're seeing represents an attempt to create anxiety in government circles and force Maduro to negotiate something, International Crisis Group analyst Phil Gunson told AFP. Be that as it may, in response to Trump's moves, Maduro has taken the stance of giving as good as he gets, at least on the face of it. On August 19th, the day before the White House ordered the 3 destroyers to head for Venezuela, in response to the bounty on his head being increased, Maduro announced the deployment of 4.5 million militiamen throughout the country, assuring that no empire will touch the sacred soil of Venezuela. As a result, thousands of civil servants, housewives, and retirees lined up in Venezuela's capital Caracas over the weekend to join the country's militia. Following the White House announcement, Venezuela petitioned the United Nations to intervene in the dispute by demanding the immediate cessation of the US military deployment in the Caribbean. And now, Maduro has stepped it up beyond the diplomatic to the military. On August 26th, Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino, another of those accused of being a Cartel of the Suns bigwig, announced a significant drone deployment along with patrols by naval vessels, including larger ships, further north in our territorial waters. For the most part, the Venezuelan armed forces don't offer much by way of deterrence when facing off against even the modest US naval force. In terms of air power, they do have 3 F-16A fighter jets, along with 6 F-5As, which are reportedly retired, and a squadron of 21 Russian Su-30s and 56 attack and support helicopters, mostly Soviet-era Mi-17s, Mi-26s, and Mi-35s. There's nothing there that the advanced US anti-aircraft defenses shouldn't be able to deal with. At sea, the Venezuelan Navy is pretty well stocked in littoral patrol boats, but in terms of larger attack craft, the fleet sent by the US already more or less matches the entire Venezuelan Navy in size. They do have 2 Mariscal Sucre-class missile frigates built in Italy in the early 1980s, but equipped with modern weapons like Automat Mark II anti-ship missiles, a Speed A surface-to-air missiles, and Mark 32 torpedoes. They also have 3 Guaquieri-class patrol boats, a class of corvettes built specifically for the Bolivarian Navy of Venezuela by Spanish shipbuilder Navantia. The vessel has a complement of 60 crew members plus 32 additional personnel and is equipped with advanced sensor systems including the Thales Smart S Mark II multifunction radar and Thales Tacticos CMS, along with multiple naval and machine guns. Both types of vessels are a real nuisance for naval drug smugglers, but surely no match for an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, let alone an Ohio-class submarine. Venezuela's ground forces number over 300,000, 8,000 active reserve members and 8 million available personnel if needed. They might not be the best or the latest, but they do have over 200 tanks, 1,200 armored fighting vehicles, 200 artillery systems, 60 self-propelled guns, and 36 rocket artillery systems. These numbers, combined with difficult terrain, limit the scope for a US invasion of any significant scale. However, it's hard to see how Venezuela could prevent the US from striking at will with missiles and bombs from the sea and air should it decide to do so. The one area where Venezuela may have a few tricks up its sleeves is in drones. Earlier in 2025, Spanish-language website Infobae revealed that Iran had established a drone development base at El Libertador Air Base in Venezuela. In addition to drone production, the Venezuelan military personnel are also being trained in the use of a wide range of Iranian unmanned aerial vehicles, including the Ansu-100, the Mahaja-2, the Ansu-600 or Mahaja-6, and the Zamora V-1, otherwise known as the notorious Shahid-131. If Venezuela has thousands or even hundreds of Shahids, then as Russia has shown in Ukraine, targeted swarms could cause plenty of damage to US ships within their range, with a reported 1,240 to 1,490 miles radius and a maximum payload of 220 to 330 pounds, including up to 4 precision-guided munitions. The Mahaja-6 could also be a dangerous weapon. This is particularly true of the B variant, which has 4 hardpoints, each capable of carrying a Qaem TV-IR guided missile or an Almas missile. At this stage, it's unclear how many of these drones or other drones Venezuela has, if any, but whatever they do have, according to the defense minister, they've been sent to the coastal regions in response to the US's arrival. The move signals Maduro's belligerence in the face of Trump's increased pressure, but there are other signs that beneath the bluster, he may be feeling the heat. Subsequent to the US fleet being dispatched, Venezuela announced the deployment of 15,000 troops to the Colombia border to fight drug trafficking in the Zulia and Taquira states, which border Colombia. "Here we do fight drug trafficking. Here we do fight drug cartels on all fronts," Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello said, adding that 53 tons of drugs have been seized so far this year. Cabello is another of the accused Cartel of the Sun's ringleaders. In a separate announcement, Defense Minister Pedrino said that an ongoing operation in Venezuela's northeastern corner had resulted in the dismantling of shipyards where criminals intended to manufacture semi-submersibles and boats to transport drugs by sea to markets in Europe and North America. These moves signal appeasement. "Look," they're saying, "we're dealing with the drug problem. You don't need to send warships to threaten us." Perhaps more revealing is that reports on August 28th suggested that Nicolas Maduro was at the Chinese embassy in Venezuela asking for support against US attacks on the country. He reportedly was seeking access to several land-to-sea defense systems, as he already has Iranian land-to-air defenses. And most revealing of all is the revelation by Brazilian defense website Defesa.net of a secret plan called Operation Imeri to rescue Maduro in the event of a US attempt to overthrow him physically. Operation Imeri foresaw the selective evacuation of Nicolas Maduro and members of his inner circle with the help of Brazil. The plan involved the Brazilian Navy creating an evacuation corridor, followed by an extraction operation conducted by a combined detachment of special operations from the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Landing on a selected airstrip, they quickly extract Maduro and his collaborators, then return to Boa Vista or Manaus in Brazil. The operation will be disguised as a humanitarian cooperation. According to the report, US intelligence services and US Southcom monitored the Brazilian plans, and ultimately, Washington made it clear that any attempt to rescue would bring new economic and diplomatic sanctions. The Brazilians have denied the reports, claiming that they were informal discussions that had been taken out of context. Still, the story doesn't give the impression of a leader supremely confident in his position. So for now, we wait and see what happens next. The Pentagon could carry out airstrikes, interdict shipments, or even put a limited number of boots on the ground from international waters in a hurry should Trump decide to do so. Maybe the US is hoping Maduro and his regime will collapse under the pressure without a shot needing to be fired. But whatever happens, we'll be on the pulse of it. So if you haven't done so yet, smash that subscribe button and enable notifications so you don't miss out. And as always, thank you for watching.